As the adventurers break the tree line, they find themselves on the edge of a sun-soaked clearing. The buzz of the insects that have pestered them through the forest fall away and are replaced with the warmth of the sun. Walking to the rise in the middle, they realize they have reached the spot they intended, a suitable place for the one lone seed that remains in the small bag gifted to them by Aurora, the Blossom Queen of the Feywild so long ago. Eli steps forward and digs a small hole in the ground with his dagger, and Val shakes the seed from the bag. It falls gently into the hole, and Eli pushes the dirt back into the hole. With a small pat, "Grow strong, little one," he speaks and says as he steps back. Together, they all watch as 4 small sprouts slowly rise from the dirt spot, rapidly increasing their speed as they slither like snakes in the blazing sun, running through the grass and finally turning skyward. They rise and twist together high overhead, forming a massive arc. Then, after a moment, the image through the portal shifts, like a shimmer from the heat of a hot summer's day. There, on the other side of the portal, is the familiar image of colored trees and plants so distinct to the Feywild. I'm going to create a series that's constructions of landmarks. So basically, almost like a diorama rather than piece by piece constructions. And I'm going to use a section of vinyl tile now that I've cut into 4 that was originally a 12 by 12. And this is what I'm going to use as my base, since it doesn't get affected by moisture and is fairly good to stay level as it dries. So I'm going to mix up some toilet paper and the plaster that I've used in the past. This creates something similar to Sculptamold, and I can use it. Its consistency is about the same as cottage cheese, and I can use this to shape a pattern on top of the tile. Just by patting it and adjusting it. It dries in about an hour, maybe an hour and a bit, and it gives me about 15 minutes or thereabout, maybe a little bit more worth of working time. I'll just press the stones into place so that it leaves an imprint on where I can glue them on later. For my vines, I'm going to use as some gardening wire or twist tie wire that I've got from the Dollarama that I can strip off the plastic and just get a wire core that I can use for the armature. And just taking several pieces of it, wind them together to create the vine-like shape that I need in order to build on. And put a few of them, twist them together. I find this is better than just using twine and glue because it gives it a little more structure. They don't break as easy. Once you've got your armature, you take some jute and jute twine, and you just measure off a section, split it into smaller strings, and you're going to take those strings, dip them in just some glue. I use the Gorilla Glue for wood. It seems to dry fairly good and quickly and strong. And then you'll take the glue-soaked twine and just wrap it around the armature in order to build some kind of body to the wire structure. And also it gives it the look that looks more like a vine rather than just a piece of wire. Alright, moving on, I'm going to glue on those rocks that I had made a little earlier, or that I pressed in. You can see at this point that I've actually drilled 4 holes in the middle that will be for the 4 vines that I created using the method shown earlier in the video. This is only about an hour and a half, I would say, after it ended up that I put the homemade Sculptamold onto the plaque, and it's as hard as plaster gets, or at least plaster of Paris gets. This the stuff I use is Dry Stone Ultimate. It'll actually harden a little bit more in the next 24 hours, but it'll become rock hard. But as I said, even at this point I had to use the drill in order to create those holes. So after adding the stones and the real rubble, I'm now going to put a coat of Aleene's tacky glue across the surface, and I'll give it some texture with some sand first to just kind of go around where the boulders are, and then across where the vines will be. So this is the arch structure. I've taken 4 of the vines that I've created and basically just wound them and twisted them around. I'm going to give them all a coat of brown just to take them away from that twine look, and start layering it with colors or paint in order to make it look more branch and vine-like. So next is I coat everything with a layer of the Mod Podge and black paint mixture. Jeremy over at Black Magic Craft is kind of the one that the guru on this stuff, and it ends up that even though the plaster is very firm and doesn't need this like foam would, of course the stones do, because they're just plain foam, and it also locks in the loose stones and any sand that might still be a little loose. So I've knocked off most of the stuff that didn't stick, but covering it gives it that extra durability. Alright, so real quick, just some highlighting on the branch ring. You can see that with the brown undercoat, and actually I'd used some Mod Podge brown mix on that one just to give it a little bit more durability on those thin vines. So this coat is just the sort of the overcoat of cashmere tan, just to set the main color on the branches. and then I'll follow up with some other highlights. One thing I do also is I take some green and I actually catch just the tips of the growth, as if it ends up it's a little bit younger growth. Now I know in my story that began the video, it ends up this all happens very quickly, the growth of this arch, but so the piece can be used in other storylines. I thought I would just add a little image like the tips are new growth, and that possibly the remaining portion is older growth of the wood. So now the black Mod Podge on the base has hardened, so I'm going to do some of the painting on it. I'll paint the sand and dirt areas just to give them their base coats, and I'll also paint the rocks in order to give them their first coat. I'm going to do some detailing on the rocks a little later, as I will with the sand and the dirt areas. Alright, so now the base coat on the stones or the rocks, as I said earlier, I'm going to cover up all the rubble and the actual stone in order to get that all looking like it's similar in terms of where it came from. So with that base coat dry, I've made the large boulders look like it ends up they have layers in them by scratching a wire brush across them. So that's when I was actually making the boulders. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and I'm going to pick out some of the rubble and highlight the individual stones with one of 4 colors. I use a light gray, a colonial blue, then a mustard yellow, and finally a brownish, a honey brown I believe it was, or a maple brown, in order to distinguish them. At the same time I'm actually making layer rings with those colors around the boulders, so that it ends up that you can see different layers of different types of stone that kind of have settled in when these boulders were part of sheets of rock. Okay, so now with those bands of color on, I'm going to take the original base coat and I'm going to apply it to blend them all together. So now I'm going to take the arch and I'm going to give it a coat of black wash just to tone down some of the colors and create those shadows in the vines wherever there's a little bit of a dip or a valley. And the base piece has dried, and I will give that a coat of black wash as well, covering the entire thing, stone and earth and sand, in order to blend it all into kind of a common tone, and also to give it those shadows in the valleys and the dips and the pockets. This also will make the banding in the boulders less noticeable, but give them the look like they're all combined together. So the arch is all done. You can see the tones and the colors. They've dried now, and you can see how everything's blended together. The stone, you can see the striations in it. You can also see a little bit of the colors. So taking some of the highlights now, I'm going to brush over again after the black wash has darkened everything down, to bring back up some of the lights and some of the colors. So I didn't have any good leaves that I could use, but I was able to find from the spice drawer some mint leaves that I basically ended up putting some glue onto the vines and then sprinkling some of the broken up leaves onto there, just to give it a texture similar to leaves on the actual branches. And this worked fairly well as an alternate to flocking that's designed for that. So one last highlight with a warm white to really pick up the sun-touched portions of the rocks and the surfaces that will be hit by more light than the rest. This just brings out some of the high details. A really light coat. This is a really light dry brush, just so that you don't drown out too much. So we're done now with the basics. Now we're moving on to flocking. This is one of my first efforts in flocking, so I go a little too heavy on it, and it ends up drowning out a lot of the hard work with the color tones and the dirt that was put in place. But in the end, it ends up it's okay for me. It still, the piece still looks good, and I'm still happy with it. So now we're going to look at putting on some clump foliage. This is just homemade clump foliage using a ground up sponge and some glue and acrylic paint combined together and just mixed, keeping the amount of water really low so that the glue and acrylic paint can bond into that sponge. Now I'm going to try, I wanted to add some color into the branches, so I actually got some little blue beads and stuck them on. I didn't have any any flowers that were manufactured like something from like a scenic manufacturer, scenic supply manufacturer. So I just glued on some of these little blue beads, and it actually added a little bit of color that was needed in those dark branches. So I'm going to take some static grass. It's kind of homemade static grass. It's just jute twine cut small and a little bit of dye added to color it. I'll stick this one down again. This is my first time using it. So now we'll take some shots of the final product. I really need to work on getting a better camera for this, but at least it ends up you'll get an idea of what the final shot looks like. You can see all the pieces have come together, and I'm pretty pleased with the product. And hopefully this will get some time on the gaming table in the near future. So everyone, hopefully you enjoyed this video, and good crafting to all. If you'd like to leave a comment, I look forward to it. I like to get the feedback of my fellow crafters and what they think of things that I'm working on, and how I can improve, or what details they like, and what details they think I should have maybe made a different choice in. But again, thank you for your time, and have yourself a great day.